John is your best boy, isn't he, Mother?
Yes, John. You're my best boy and the best surgeon in town.
Well, you're keeping very well. You know, I'm going to be all right. Why is it still when it's pleased? Now, I grow when I'm pleased. Did I look at your house?
I told you to take these things out of my eyes.
Don't get upset.
Take them out. Do you hear me? Do you hear me? Do you hear me? Do you hear me?
Don't be sorry.
You're mad. I'm mad. You're mad.
All the eyes of the city will be ours.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Sleazoids, the podcast where we go down the rabbit hole of 20th century genre fare, from the most influential canon classics to the trashiest exploitation films we can get our hands on, and invite you to tag along in helping us create a canon of sleaze. Each week is a double feature grindhouse style where we discuss two films loosely related by subject, genre, actor, filmmaker, or franchise at the end of each episode, along with our honorary Sleazoids, which you can become by subscribing on Patreon.
Next week, we're talking sad, lonely men that are very good at their jobs, so join the sleaze.
We decide on all the official ratings and rankings for every film that we cover. Patreon subscribers also get an honor shout-out and 2 bonus episodes every single month, which we have been doing for almost 3 years now, which is insane to think about. But if you guys haven't made the jump, there are a lot of bonus episodes waiting for you, something like 70 plus maybe now, plus our bonus transmission series where we talk about new release genre films.
Hours of content.
So again, patreon.com/Sleazoids podcast if that interests you at all. And speaking of which, we did have a lot of people make the jump this week, so I'm going to give them their shout outs here. We have Nick Metler, Ryan W. We had Adam Fours upgrading from his $5 a month to the $10 a month, who's going to be getting on our $10 a month virtual screening that we do every month. We have Robert Simmons, Alan Welsh, Jared Cons, John Callahan, Pinky Promise, Newho, Mark Willems, and we are still going. Beautiful. We have Will DC, Keith Henry Brown, James McDermott, Logan Williams, Evan Gordon, and PJ Endler. Oh, and I think I missed one. Lottie Cashin.
Perfect. Thank you so much, guys.
It's a lot of new signups this month. Thanks so much, guys. Hope you guys are enjoying all those bonus episodes. We appreciate that. The other plug for the week, as always, is Apple Podcasts. If you guys are listening on Apple Podcasts, and I see the stats, I know that you're there. I can see you right now listening on Apple Podcasts. Scroll down to the very bottom right now. Give us a good old rating and review down there. It helps us climb the ranks and find new listeners, and we have been hearing about people finding us that way, so we appreciate that as well. And then last but not least, the third plug, the new third plug, we have merch. If you guys like the artwork that horror artist out of Toronto, Trevor Henderson, and guest and friend of the show did for the show, you can now put that on just about anything, mugs, hoodies, t-shirts, whatever you'd like, whatever you can think of, just poster art. We have poster art hanging up in the apartment now.
That's right.
The link to all of the merch is in the description of this episode, as well as at sleazoidspodcast.com. But whew, all right, that intro, it really is becoming a mouthful. Welcome back. I am your host, as always, Josh Lewis, and joining me also, as always, my co-host,
Jamie Miller. Welcome back, everybody.
Welcome back to another episode. I think 2 weeks ago would have been the last time you guys would have heard from us, when we had the director of programming over at Shudder.com, the streaming service that is based on all horror and thrillers and lots of great short exploitation movies I have discovered through that streaming service, especially because it's incredibly cheap. I think I pay for the year, so I think I pay something like $4 a month.
Yeah. Was that the one that you found Bolorama on? With that crazy monster? Yeah.
Yes, so I find myself scrolling through Shudder and recreating my video store experience of looking at the cover and being like, oh, that's 85 minutes. Let's just throw that on. Yeah. And that was how we got sorority babes at the slime ball Bolorama on the show, just because I thought that was such a curiosity. Yeah. But yeah, special guest Sam Zimmerman of Shudder. He brought on Let's Scare Jessica to Death and The Legend of Hell House, two kind of maybe lesser talked about early 70s horror films that stylistically were kind of emblematic of what the rest of the decade would kind of look like. Yeah. And both were very fun to break down with Sam.
Yeah, especially the finale of Hell House. That's a wild ride.
One of the craziest reveals I've ever seen in a horror movie that honestly maybe even hurt it a little bit, but it was wild.
Yeah, Short King representation, everybody.
That's right. And yeah, Let's Scare Jessica to Death, filmmaking wise, is very, very incredible.
Yeah.
And then for last week's bonus episode over on Patreon, going off of John Huff's Legend of Hell House, I knew that I really wanted to talk about his underseen, really gross Canadian horror film, The Incubus, with John Cassavetes from 1982. And what would that pair with? None other than John Cassavetes slumming it in another paycheck horror exploitation role, Brian De Palma's The Fury from 1978. So
with once again another fantastic finale for different reasons, but...
Very different reasons, but if you ever wanted to see very prestigious filmmaker and actor John Cassavetes literally explode before your eyes, I would recommend last week's episode.
Yeah.
Again, patreon.com/Sleazoids podcast. That was last week's bonus episode exclusive over there. But this week, we have a very special guest joining us. She is the web editor over at Harper's Magazine and also the host of the podcast over there. She's a film critic whose writing has appeared in New York Times, Sight and Sound, Film Comment, and I know her personally because she used to also be one of the many co-hosts of the Film Comment podcast, which is like one of the maybe one or two film podcasts that I actually listened to because I hated most of them so much so that I started my own. But that was one of my few favorites. So joining us this week is Violet Lucca. Violet, how you doing?
I'm great. Thank you for having me on. It's so nice to hear that the Film Comment podcast was an enjoyable experience.
Yes.
Or inspirational.
It was. I mean, not to begrudge anyone who's does the same thing that we do, but the reason we did start a podcast was because we found most film podcasts were like recapping the plot and like riffing.
Yeah.
That was just what 90% of them were. So that was why we started one. That was one of the few that was not like that, and I really appreciated it as like a young film nerd.
Oh. Yeah, no, I also was like not really listening to many film podcasts, so I really enjoy Sleazoids because
well, thank you.
I don't know, it's
thanks so much.
Genre, I don't know, it's weird. It's like some people are associated. They're like, oh yeah, that's a genre person. That's like the horror expert, and it's like I watch fucking horror movies every day of all the time. Yeah. I don't wait until October. But I'm not right. Like I haven't branded myself as like a horror person. But I enjoy it immensely. So
yeah.
Well, welcome. Well, we're very excited to talk about the films that you're bringing on this week because I hadn't even heard of one of them, and the other one was one that I've been meaning to watch for a long time and was very shocked about what the actual movie was because I kind of avoided watching it for a while. But as the show goes, Violet, we have the guests bring on the double features. So what two films have you brought with you this week, and why did you pair them together?
So I chose Bigas Lunas's Anguish, which is a 1987 film. And I also brought on James, Jesus Christ. She'd be really mad if she heard me say that. I brought on Jane Arden's The Other Side of Underneath, which is a 1972 film. And I thought, these are kind of exploring the same issues, but in very, very different ways. And they have very different feelings. And both, I think, are concerned with psychiatry, madness, narrative structure, and sort of and gender, and what the patriarchy does, what society does to people. So I thought they would be a neat fit.
Perfect.
No, absolutely. I was really taken with how both of these in different ways use a lot of formal experimentation to get at these sort of these feelings of like some sort of psychological breakdown, again in different ways, and also how they defy sort of screen convention in a lot of different ways as well. Yeah. So the pairing ended up really working for us, I think. And as we typically tend to do on the show, we are going to, I think, start in chronological order here. So we are going to actually begin with The Other Side of Underneath.
The really complicated one.
Yes.
Yeah.
The insanely complicated one.
You're mad. I'm mad. I'm mad. Mad. I'm mad. Come in, little girl. Come in.
All right, we are talking The Other Side of the Underneath, the 1972 British experimental psychological quasi-horror film written and directed by Jane Arden. The film stars if correct me if I'm wrong here, it stars a lot of the people who were in Jane Arden's theater troupe.
The troupe's name was Holocaust, so it gives you a sense of
Wow.
the vibe.
Damn.
Yes. So it has a lot of actresses who go in unnamed roles, but many of their Penny Slinger is in there, Sheila Allen, Sally Minford, Jack Bond, who from what I understand is someone who actually also worked with Jane Arden and actually shot part of the film as well and produced the film.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, they were lovers too for many years.
Well, there you go. See, you're going to have to give us the backstory history on this because I actually was not aware of this at all. But watching it, I was like, how was I not aware of this? Because it's insane. And Jane Arden appears in the film herself. I believe she plays the therapist character, one of the few characters who gets a distinctual role outside of being the patient of an institution slowly going insane. But this film was based on her play called A New Communion for Freaks, Prophets, and Witches. And very loosely, it is kind of just a formal critique of the institution of psychiatry. I mean, especially I imagine the way that it was in the 60s, and the ways that it kind of really is just hellishly playing around in people's minds. And the film sort of takes on formally the idea of the characters' memories and fantasies and physical realities kind of all becoming this one horrible, incomprehensible experience. And in terms of the filmmaking, it's really incredibly impressive piece of like sustained hysteria and claustrophobia and, you know, sort of the act of finding some sort of sensorial freedom in ways, sort of defying the rules laid out by the institutions who are trying to both diagnose these women with hysteria and schizophrenia, but also straight up admitting that they're just kind of playing around. They don't know exactly what it is they're doing. And Arden kind of replicates that by also basically just breaking all down narrative convention, breaking the formal rules as well as the institutional rules, and the shooting and sequencing. It's really insane. And the film gets lost completely in these girls' minds. And as a result, it's kind of a difficult film that's open to, I'm sure, many interpretations. So maybe, Violet, you could walk us through your experience with this film.
Sure. I mean, going back to criticisms of psychology, in the late 60s, there was sort of this famous book by R.D. Laing, where he was a psychologist who said that, you know, the world is insane. The way society is structured is insane. And schizophrenics, they're having the correct reaction to it. And so calling into question, neurotypicality or the ideal what we would. I mean, I think we still consider this the ideal mind, where it's your emotions are under control, all of your motivations are rational, and how that these patients should not be locked away, but they should have they should be not medicated. They should not be subjected to sometimes ghoulish treatments. They should instead sort of be able to move around as they are. And he created this room in some psychiatric facility where it was just like only the schizophrenics. He took them off their medication, etc., and they got better. But then when they were released, back into the real world, a lot of them, had problems again, had to come back into an institution. So he's a kind of a controversial figure. However, I see, there are other people, because of him and other people sort of questioning this idea of what healthy is.
Yeah.
I think Arden was very clearly picking up on that. She actually wrote a self-help book after this film came out on how to deprogram yourself from being being enslaved to your rational mind. But I see why she would be drawn to this. She was a very outspoken feminist, and obviously the history of psychology, the very new science, but it's still one I think that is it's very patriarchal, right? Especially in its early days, where women were considered hysterics, and the way to treat hysteria was to have them orgasm, right? Or that 50s housewives that, if this woman is not happy being a 50s, a housewife only, and a wife and a mother and only doing those activities, if she is somehow not happy doing that, there's something wrong with her. She needs to be medicated. She needs to be, she needs to get barbiturates to keep her mood up, and then tranquilizers to put her to sleep. That sort of idea of fitting people into these predetermined societal roles that, again, are completely relative to the time that, that they are in. So, obviously things have changed, but also things have not changed. We still maintain this idea of what the healthy mind is. And I think, people, all this, there's a ton of self-help stuff out there still. Or even but now it's kind of taking on a businessy sort of a thing.
Right.
It's like wake up at 4 a.m. Or I don't know, that goddamn commercial 5 to 9, the Dolly Parton thing, where this just made me so sad. I was just like, because 9 to 5 is such a good movie, where it's just like, fuck your boss. And then it's like, no, just work every waking moment, because you got to hustle. That's great. Anyway.
Yeah, personally, I'm electing the Mark Wahlberg lifestyle of going to sleep at 6 in the afternoon, so that you can wake up at 3 in the morning and play golf or whatever it is that he does
every day, baby.
Look, man, that sounds great. And again, you're not working the 9 to 5. Fuck yeah.
Yeah, well, and you know what? It's funny too. I really was taken by the original name of her play, where she called it A Communion for Freaks, Prophets, and Witches, because it actually did remind me a little bit. We just talked about it a couple weeks ago. We were talking about Haxon, the Swedish silent era film about of witchcraft throughout the ages, and one of the many things that film addresses was how modern psychiatry and psychology at the time, which would have been 1920, even he was like, the closest resemblance we have to what this looked like was witchcraft, was when people were like, these women are acting out of societal norms, let's burn them. And now obviously he's like, we don't burn them, but the husbands just drop them off, lock them up, and drug them. And so there is a similar kind of experience that you get from this film, because it really does feel kind of like more like a folk horror kind of movie. It reminded me a little bit of like sort of like witchcraft cinema, despite the fact that really it hasn't, you know, nothing like that going on in it. But it's just very, very creepily made. It has like this really ominous, like abrasive, like cello sounds and metronome sounds, and
they used a lot of like metallic sounds too, like with like it almost feels like people are just like scraping metal in certain rooms and things like that, and it creates this like, and they use a lot of echoes and reverbs that actually don't match the space that they're in. There's one specific part where a woman is playing the cello, and it's in a couple moments, but one that I'm thinking of is near the end when she's outside doing it, and it's got this kind of like warehouse reverb to it, but she's outside, so it creates this like otherworldly effect, like they're channeling something else, something bigger than them or something like that. It's very cool.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and I'll talk about the ending. Not that you could possibly spoil this film, but you know, the film, you know, you are kind of swirling around these different. I mean, if you you know, the actresses who participated in the film talked about how they were basically being tortured by Arden, and you know, it's funny to think of like this sort of sadism is typically associated with male directors, but she was doing this to, you know, a group of women in the name of feminism.
Groundbreaking.
But, you know, well, hey, it happens. We all make mistakes.
You got to get that shot.
Got it. Yeah. But I mean, so, and what she does, what she has them do is she kind of blends like allegorical punishments with actual kind of tortures that were applied to the mentally ill, you know, like throwing somebody in a bath, but then also these insane, I shouldn't say insane, I should say these very intense group therapy sessions. And you get the sense that it's like, okay, this is not the characters, this is them talking to each other. And they're very, I mean, I like that part. It was probably the most terrifying or sort of like affecting for me, because you know, what they're talking about, particularly that, you know, we have to kind of preserve this image. We have to keep up some mad image for someone, somewhere or other, and you know how that relates to. Well, I was actually just reading about this the other day, that Jonah Peretti, who's one of the founders of BuzzFeed, he wrote this. He wrote his PhD dissertation on it, and it was called "Capital and Schizophrenia: Contemporary Visual Culture and the Acceleration of Identity Formation and Dissolution." And basically, you know, he's building off of critiques from Deleuze and Guattari, anti-Oedipus stuff, basically that capitalism would need to create an ever-growing number of micro-identities for people to fit themselves into, and that these identities would be commodified by capitalism and marketed to. And of course, this is the guy who started the website where it's like 25 things only kids who went to Christian camp in the 90s know. Like this sort of, I mean, it's like, and you know, when they're talking about that, you know, I was like, well, that's even more true now, right? Because because of social media, because of what people at their jobs are, how they are expected to behave, how people are expected to, you know, behave with family members or racist family members, like all of these different things that are kind of, you know, being pushed upon us that are not for ourselves, but they are for someone else. And of course, that also kind of reminded me of Sartre's No Exit, where hell is where you can only see yourself through other people. There's no mirror. You cannot define yourself for yourself. You only see yourself through other people. But the ending, I think, is really fascinating because it concludes with this. I sort of see it as this ritual. It's a trance ritual, and trance rituals exist in different cultures all over the world, and those rituals have a great deal of similarity to what symptoms typically associated with schizophrenia are, where, you know, there's there's rocking back and forth. You're going into a trance. You're becoming someone else. You are hearing voices, except for it's this highly ritualized way of doing that. And you know, at the end of this film, you see the patients. They become part of this. It's sort of like a drum circle, but cooler.
Yeah.
Where you know they're you know there are these fires burning, and they're kind of like letting something out. They are expressing their you know they're exercising the things that have bothered them. And there's this one woman on stilts who's kind of done up like a Vegas stripper, or I guess if you're in England, like a really sexy music hall thing. I don't know. But she's on stilts. She's on stilts. And I would call her like the main patient in the film. She walks beneath her legs. And so it's like this metaphorical rebirth. You know, she's passing under this woman. She is transcending something, and that all the horrors that you have seen have led up to this point where it's something. It's not unhealthy. It's a totally natural expression of feeling and psyche. And I thought it was so brilliant.
Something.
Well, yeah, and contrast to that with like especially like the early scenes of the film, or what large portions of the scenes of the film are, which is obviously they're nearby this Welsh mining town, and we're introduced with like you know like a crew trying to like resuscitate a drowned woman and fish her out of a lake, and you're not sure whether she's run away or she tried to commit suicide, but very quickly you understand why someone would be trying to get to those beautiful countrysides, because they are take her back to like this dilapidated houses and this sort of like psychiatric institution where, you know, filmed with like tons of like really creepy wide angle lens images. There's like peeling wallpaper and like scary clowns and random goats popping up in your room.
And I like the way that like what you just said, where you could see like the forestry and all that. Eventually, this film takes about like an hour or so in the institution, and there's a moment where they finally, I think one of the women get out, and you know she's outside and you can see the trees again, and I remember feeling like a sense of relief where it was like I'm no longer in these concrete walls.
Oh my God! Yeah,
with a some person with a cello just playing just some random melody. And that's also something that connects with the ending, where the most of this film really is like watching these individuals in their own spaces going through the trauma or whatever it is, kind of alone and dealing with it alone. Whereas as the film goes and progresses, they get closer and closer to one another, to a point where eventually they're within like their community again briefly, and then it leads to that harmonious finale where they all come together. And I just really appreciated and liked that progression that the film takes with showing that.
Yeah,
well, showing them coming together.
Especially too because the like opening hour of the film is so harsh and so creepy. I was actually reminded of Fred Wiseman's Titticus Follies, documentary he did, which was just a documentary of real graphic film shot in the conditions of, you know, sort of like a state prison where they well,
no, it was a state mental health facility. And
right, but I think it was very specifically, though, it was like ones who had committed crimes or something like that, like ones who needed like for some reason in the description they do call it a prison. I mean, whether it is they call it a mental institution or not, it definitely the like depiction is absolutely a prison. Well, you watch them force feeding them, you watch them just humiliating them, isolating them, stripping them, and watching them be taunted by like guards and things like that. Yeah. So you get like that real brutal conditions of, you know, sort of like the lives of the patients, but here Arden takes that and you get sort of like similar feelings of these patients' treatments, but done in like a really surreal, subjective style that just makes it even more unbearable. Because as Violet said, you know, like they show the treatment of them, you know, like throwing them into the tubs and things like that. But the actual experience of that is much so in the filmmaking. It's so hallucinatory and like claustrophobic. And like, again, these characters are conjuring images up that, you know, properly express what it is they're feeling, because, you know, you'll get a scene where, you know, she's talking with Jane Arden, who's playing the therapist, and she's like, you know, just asking her questions, you know, do you think you're ill? You know, what don't you like about your face? She's like holding up a mirror and showing it to her, even though she's, you know, clearly not happy with that.
Well, she says, I don't want to see it. Right.
Yeah. And she always says, I feel like you're always trying to make a fool out of me. Like we're not having real conversations as a one-on-one people. And so she's describing the feelings of, you know, her therapy sessions as, you know, someone who is hurting her, but she doesn't hate that person who's hurting her. And I think she refers to it. She's like, is that stupidity or is that masochistic? But what's funny is that, you know, like you will get that sort of, you know, just a therapist and a patient talking to each other. That's really all that's happening in that scene. And then the next scene will be, you know, how she actually felt during that scene. And it will be like a fucking clown popping up in her room being like,
that scene
you've got a pointless mind.
Yes, yes. I mean, yeah. The stuff that happens in the rooms is so it's really intense. And I mean, even like, you know,
which is again a terrible word to use, but that's the feeling of watching it.
Yeah, it's terrifying.
Yeah, it's truly unsettling. Maybe that's more accurate way to put it.
Yeah.
You know, where this woman is kind of docile and lying in bed, and there's a lamb laying in the bed with her, and then, you know, there's somebody in a cabinet sort of shaking around until the cabinet falls right onto the bed, and or you know, the clown sort of antagonizing her, but also trying to be like, hey, little girl, don't you want to have fun? Do you want to be my assistant? Do you want to be a part of my show?
Yeah.
And that, you know, like that invitation is, I mean, it clearly refers to, you know, I don't know, it's like a fucked up version of, what's that Robin Williams movie? God damn it.
The one where he's the clown and he goes into the hospitals or whatever?
Patch Adams.
Yeah.
Patch Adams. Yeah, it's like a fucked up version of Patch Adams. Right? It's like, come on, let's laugh this. You know, join me. Look how sane I am. And
yeah.
You know, the I mean, and that goes back to, you know, this idea of like, if you are well, you will fit into this society that actually sucks. That is bad.
Yeah.
I love the way that Arden films that scene too, because there's a lot of just different imagery, like you were saying with the girl kind of thrashing in the cabinet, and then it'll cut back to the clown, and it has this really off-kilter camera angle where it's like it's kind of pointing upwards. And
so it's a low angle shot with a wide angle lens,
yeah.
so it's very weird.
Yeah, and she's constantly just smiling and laughing, and it just gives this thought of like this clown entity is kind of like overlooming in her in the space, and it's absolutely terrifying. It really is. And they use the clown a couple times throughout the movie. Even in the moment where they get into the field and you're outside again, there's another kind of really terrifying image of both of them close up, and the girl is just completely straight-faced, just trying to, like, I think get through the episode, where the clown is right next to her face, almost like yelling at her, and there's a lot of that's just very unsettling, very terrifying.
Right. I mean,
definitely, and there's a lot of really surreal set pieces that take place throughout the whole thing, right? Like I was really taken by the one where she wakes up and she's in a bathroom stall next to a little girl with a creepy mask on, and she starts wandering through like this what looks like this like rundown concert venue area, and she ends up in a room where there's just a noise band playing, and she pulls out like a rubber axe and just starts trying to like chop a woman up with it, but you can see the axe bending, and so it's not a real axe, but blood is still flying everywhere out of it.
Yeah. Well, I thought that scene is because there's also this, and I mean, I know this is maybe an image that somewhat dates the film, but you know, it's the main patient gets buried in a wedding dress, and then there's this incredible scene where she's in the dark in a graveyard, and they're projecting images of, I guess, from the Blitz and other sort of post-war things onto her, and it's kind of shaking around.
Yeah.
And the song that they also, you know, they're playing the song that's from the opera Faust called the Soldier's Chorus, and it's like, you know, our fathers were brave and our sons will be brave too. And what's interesting about that particular song is not just that it had, you know, it's really a celebration of, you know, male generation to male generation, and that war, you know, that you must be brave during war, that you must be, you know, a rational, brave person, is that opera really changes the legend of Faust. Like, it's supposedly based on Goethe's story, but instead it focuses on Faust's love of this woman named Marguerite. And so Marguerite is this beautiful, pure character that Faust loves, and Mephistopheles is trying to sort of help him get with her, but then at one point Mephistopheles like tricks her into killing her daughter with an axe, just like in the band scene. Then at the end of the opera, she is taken to heaven by the angels because she is so pure, and that, you know, she is this perfect woman, right? And so it's interesting to see, you know, the only time, you know, not the only time, but, you know, a full band really going for it in this big operatic way where she's, you know, she's kind of trying to chop up this passive, you would say, like, childlike other woman. And that, but then also it's this notion that, well, I can't kill this part of me. I can't kill this docility in me, this thing that has been handed to me by the patriarchy, this expectation, right? So there's even within scenes, there's just so much stuff going on. Even though it is just like a hippie band playing in the background.
Well, that's just it, is that it's, you know, it's all of these ideas like expressed in just like unhinged, like unexplained filmmaking. But credit to Arden is that you do feel all of that watching this film. Like, this is a very unique film when it comes to just the actual, you know, the visual and sonic experience of watching it. Yeah, I was very taken with it, and all the surrealist sequences throughout it, because again, large portions of this are just watching them wander these, you know, really claustrophobic dreamscapes, kind of wondering, like, is any of this real? And it is real in the sense that the feelings of it are all real. This is actually, you know, this is sort of an external expression of something that is really happening internally, and that way it kind of reminded me a little bit. Maybe also just because I've been watching a lot of it recently, but it reminded me a little bit of Maya Deren, who I recently went through the whole Kino Lorber box set that they released of hers, and I was really taken with her work because it has this very strong sense of kind of like this feminine internal expression, but written in experimental formal dream logic. And there's something very, very similar that Arden is getting at here, but also a lot more abrasive, a lot more there's a very pointed critique here of the mistreatment of the women and the feelings that they're feeling, that it is just really taken to some extremes that are very uncomfortable, but you know, also very effective.
Right. Well, the mirror, the use of mirrors here is very much like
especially
and,
like that scene where specifically where it's the two of them looking at each other, and there's just broken shards of mirror lying all around the bed and stuff like that. That was like, oh man, I feel like I'm watching a Maya Deren short right now.
Right. Well, and I mean, Deren referred to her films as trance films, and she was very interested in Haitian voodoo. And she actually went to Haiti, and there's this big unfinished project that she had. But again, certain voodoo rituals have, you know, a trance element to them, where, you know, that's there's a blurring between dream and reality, and maybe what we would consider, you know, where you're being inhabited by someone else. And again, how that relates to schizophrenia, or you're bringing multiple people into your body and letting them speak through you. So I mean, I I was also thinking of Darren a lot.
There was one scene that I found, like, it showed at least a sense of community with all of these like fever dreams that are going on throughout the film, is when they're all together. And I believe that there's one woman that's crying very hard. She's going through a lot of pain, and it's I think it's like a therapy session of some kind, and they all kind of come together and surround her. And it was like one moment of just actual like emotional support, which was nice, because a lot of the time they're just dealing with this individually, and there's just small moments where they actually build to or have a community to help them.
Yeah, there's all those secluded sequences, like there's the woman in the bathtub. There's the other woman who's in like the weird church portion, which looks like this really dirty like prison bar, but there's like a crucifixion in the back of it and stuff like that. So a lot of the film is these women secluded within their own sort of psychological experiences and how horrifying they are. And then, as Jamie's saying, like there are parts where it branches into more like these group therapy sessions, or eventually what is like kind of unclear whether it's a real physical escape or it is a psychological escape, because just the way that the film is drawn. But that is what it is eventually building to. And are you talking about like the scenes in the community, like when they eventually make their way out and they're kind of joining like the field parties and stuff?
The first one I was talking about is when I think they're having a therapy session within the actual
the group
institution,
therapy session.
And this one woman is crying very hard, and it's a moment where they're all kind of surrounding her and actually comforting her in some way. But then it leads to that community section outside, where at first it feels nice because it's like, it feels like they're back with their families in some way. They're all playing music. There's this nice this guy in a blue suit with a nice deep voice that like sings like a folk song. And then as it goes, it just starts to get more like hedonistic,
very different than the noise music from the surreal sequence,
the experimental noise metallic music. Yes. And then as the scene goes, it just starts to get more like just I don't know if it's like hedonistic. That you have a scene where people are next to a lake and they start to make love. And at first it seems
that's Jack
nice,
Arden.
but is it? Oh, okay.
The guy. So I mean, again, talking about sort of tortures for this in the name of this film. Jane Arden made Jack Bond have sex with one of the actresses, and she filmed it.
Oh my god, Jane Arden is a wild one.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
Well, he liked the Spitfire type, because they originally met on this when he was making this documentary about Salvador Dali, and she was just like giving Dali so much shit that he almost couldn't make the film because Dali's like, what the fuck. But anyway,
holy shit. Yeah, and
I like too the other bit of community that they do before even they hit the field is the shows that they put on. There's like that musical strip show that felt like it was like straight out of like Killing of a Chinese Bookie or something like that.
Definitely, yeah, 100%.
And I really liked that too, because like that's an example of sort of like art bringing the people together a little bit there. But also too, I like that, that there is that sense of community that, they get, but then also there is still that kind of undercurrent of like something is still, sort of like off or kind of wrong in a way. And
that they can't be together fully.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do appreciate that is, that's still the feeling you kind of get, like, even when you get to the end of it. Because, I mean, that sex scene is just so, like, they're just right next to a creek on a rock. They're just grabbing and, like, flailing. And
the actress covers up her face, too, right? Like,
and it ends with her falling in the creek, where where it cuts into being the drowned patient in the tub with the peeling paint on the walls, and just it looks like the kid's bathtub in like Gummo or something like that. And like that's where that sex scene leads to, is the woman waking up in that. Right. It's really horrible, actually.
No, well, one thing I wanted to ask about, because I watched this many years ago, and then I rewatched. Obviously, I rewatched it for this. But there's this one part that I forgot existed, and it comes right before, you know, the big party out in the community, where it's the therapist and this other woman sitting in a park and talking with each other, and the therapist is describing this treatment that she's been putting this woman through, and it's like, well, you know, she can't see her husband or children. Like I had to try and like get her to this point so she could, stabilize her basically. And the woman who's listening to her talk asks, you know, she is like, well, how do you define schizophrenia? And the therapist is like, well, it's entirely dependent on who's diagnosing. And the woman responds.
That's so telling. Yeah.
And the woman responds, which is, I love this. She says, so it's entirely through his eyes. Mm-hmm. Even though she's talking to a female therapist, a professional, you know, who does this all the time, this woman is still like, the doctor is a man. And I thought that was that just really stuck out to me this time. And of course that they're surrounded by children, and you hear the sounds of like children being happy, and they're like so far away from the isolation and the terror of the institution.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I like that specifically she mentions too that, I think she mentions that there are like 3 or 4 doctors in the institution, that each one of them has a completely different definition, and how you come out depends on who you've been assigned to.
Right.
It's like there is no right fix to this issue or these people's problems, that it is entirely dependent on the, sort of like basically the theory of this person who's just playing with your head.
Subjective interpretation of what might be going on.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah. So whether you come out, once again, someone who can participate in, sort of like the domestic status quo is, dependent on whether, the doctor sort of decides that that's what they're going to do or not. Yeah. So it does sort of, critique that power dynamic for sure, because you're getting the experience of, the patients having their minds played with, and how each one of them is having a completely different experience in their own way.
Yeah. And that nothing is really resolved.
No. In fact, they all just become their unique individual sort of personality and treatment, but all together during that, during what amounts to a like nude mountain crucifixion.
Oh God,
that's a wild image. Yeah,
they got like the bonfire. They got the woman on stilts. They got the drumming, the cymbals. Just they completely let loose with like both the body and the mind and the camera.
I like that they're surrounded by some type of manufacturing building or some type of tower that's just on fire, and that's kind of like what they're worshiping. I don't know if
because it's a Welsh mining town,
right. So it's like
because she was born in Wales, so this is like you want to talk about Freudianism. She's kind of going back home to sort some things out, maybe.
Yeah, definitely.
Definitely, but I also like the very last lines of the film where it's the therapist asking her to tell says, tell me about your head, and she says, I don't know very much about my head.
Yes.
and you're left with like that sort of unhinged ritualistic sort of like surreal sequence of all of them, collaborating in, sort of like this, again, it's a bonfire with crucifixions, with stilts, with drumming, with music, with just everything.
Cellos.
Yeah.
Well, cello being the instrument you have to really spread your legs to play. And I'm sure that's something Arden had very much in her mind, where she's like, I need a woman playing the cello.
Yeah.
She definitely likes to repeat that image.
Yeah. It's fantastic.
Well, and also there's a little bit of conversation after what you mentioned, where she's like, I don't know my head, where in the final line of the film is the patient saying, because you hate us, to the therapist. Yeah. And it's such because again, this therapist is an agent of what Arden sees as the patriarchy of health, of this thing, of this expectation that women live up to these conflicting ideas of who they must be in order to be healthy and acceptable to society and to their husbands and to their children. And it was very chilling.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a truly terrifying movie.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because I didn't even think of it as a horror movie when I first saw it. And then like Richard Brody did a listicle of like good horror movies this year. And I saw it on there. I was like, oh yeah, I guess it is a horror movie. Okay.
Yeah.
When you think about it, for sure. And I mean, stylistically, like there's not much different going on here than what you would, expect from many other sort of like surreal psychological, horror films that are drawn. Like the filmmaking and the formal dream logic of it, the formal nightmare logic of it is very similar to what you would see.
And even just simple imagery that we're kind of used to, even like I guess, but she always adds a twist. I mean, like an axe murderer, but this time she has a 8-year-old child in a mask holding the axe. Well,
right.
I think another little boy's running around in a diaper getting chased by the axe person as well at one point. So yeah, there's definitely like some traditional horror imagery, but then she always finds a way to just make it kind of like this fever dream nightmare.
Well, and there's this part where one of the patients is wandering around, and in the narration or in voiceover, you hear the part of Alice in Wonderland where Alice asks the Cheshire Cat how it knows that she's mad, and how does the cat know he's mad, right? And I mean, it's interesting to think about Lewis Carroll. Mercury poisoned pedophile that he was, but also cherished children's book author, right? And that by keeping these women in this institution, they're being infantilized in a very real way. That they're not, their movement is restricted. They're being treated like children. Again, going back to scary clown stuff. But then they're also being expected to grow up, which is something, that's a big conflict in Alice in Wonderland too. But I mean, but then of course, just on a very surface level, it's like, well, here's a story you read as a child that mentions madness. But what happens if we look a little deeper into it? I mean, that's what, I think there's a lot of that going on, where if you just say like, oh, there's an excerpt from Alice in Wonderland in this, you kind of roll your eyes like, yeah, of course. It was like 60s, early 70s feminism. Of course, they're going to fucking mention that. But the way she takes that and really turns it on its head and fits it into these other things that are happening in the film, or even just putting it in the context of an asylum that's only for women. I think it really.
Yeah, I mean, just upgrading those ideas and putting them in the very specific context of a psychiatric institution as a force of the status quo and sexual, religious, and patriarchal oppression, just all at the same time. And again, also drawing that in a sense of again, you have sort of like the more surreal filmmaking qualities to it, but the stuff that's not is really dirty and gritty and from I'm assuming for some reasons for budgetary constraints, but it has like that 70s kind of grotesquerie to it a little bit, with again just the dilapidated look of the rooms that they're in, and how she shoots them to really distort them with the angled lenses and things like that too, to make them even scarier. And so I mean, I think that maybe pivoting towards the reductive rating around here, which for you, Violet, where we remove all the words, all the nuance, and reduce the movie between a number between 1 and 5, but it's also turned into closing statements. And if there was any scenes or lines we didn't hit, we usually bring them up here. It's usually, that's kind of what it's turned into. But I think like that, again, the fact that I was thinking about, sort of like the, Fred Wiseman documentary filmmaker who made a film about a really graphic portrayal about the conditions of, sort of like this mental institution. The fact that I'm at once thinking about that, about, what feels like very real pain, very horrible, mistreatment of people by an institution. And then also thinking of Maya Deren, who could not be further from that, who is drawing completely in experimental, formal dream logic in a lot of different ways. and trying to create these very heightened images. So the fact that both of those were things that came up shows to me that Arden is doing something very interesting here, and especially too the fact that despite the fact that this is a very scary, I would describe a hostile movie. It's very assaultive. I could see why this would be a hard film for someone to watch.
Yeah.
That's just the way that it's drawn. Despite that, it's a very sensitive film. It's a film that feels like looking at yourself in a broken mirror in that kind of way. It's got that jagged edge to it, but it also has that there's something real and truthful happening there, and so it doesn't care much about tracking the narrative as it does about capturing the feelings of hysteria and institutional quote unquote help, turning that into like this strange fun house poem almost, where you're not really meant to make sense of it in some ways, because in reality it's really just a figure of authority who is playing with you, hurting you. And the experience of the film once again can be grueling, but Arden very transgressive and avant-garde style that she's applying it to. So I was very taken with it. So this one gets a very high 4 from me. Yeah, and she has like just what I love too is while showing you all of these really just pretty wild images and kind of like a very incoherent story, because it's not really a story. You're just kind of taking in what these women are going through and trying to get into their headspace. There's a lot of, is this happening or is this
right?
And even with all the
going on in someone's head,
coherent wildness, it does have a lot of empathy and sympathy for them throughout, which I just loved, because I could find a lesser filmmaker would find a way to still give you these kind of like terrifying images, but not express them in a way that has real empathy for the characters. But this is just it's you can tell that she really wanted to show how these systems corrupt the mind and can take over in that sense. And I love just the thought of them going through it individually and not really having a sense of community or anything like that, and then leading to the end where it becomes this harmonious like music of trauma. And I just thought that that was a great way of expressing that. And yeah, has she done other films? Is this the only film that she directed?
Oh no, she did several other films.
Okay,
usually in collaboration with Jack Bond.
Okay,
one of them. I mean, I think her last. I think Anti-Clock was like her last film, I believe, and that's almost more of a conventional. Well, I don't know, sort of. No, I wouldn't even say it's conventional. It's less combative.
More so than this, yeah.
yeah. It's kind of like a sci-fi thing.
Okay,
but it's shot on early video, and it's through closed circuit TV monitors. It's really excellent. And it's also available on YouTube for free. So is this movie.
Oh, awesome.
I think, yeah.
But yeah, for me, it was a 4 out of 5.
Definitely
and the thing that stood out for me, once again, is just the way that she used music and how it kind of connected with the women's minds, especially that scene with
those
band.
screeching and scratching sounds are really horrible.
Oh yeah, horrifying. The sound design is very, very good in this. And I once again love that scene with the band itself and having that the synthesizer or keyboardist just kind of go wild, and as that song progresses, it just gets more and more incoherent, more expressive, just more angry, really. It's just great. I loved the way they use music in this. So yeah, 4 out of 5 for me.
Absolutely. For you, Violet.
So I'm going to give this 5 out of 5 yonic symbols.
Nice.
Let's go.
I thought it was, it's I mean, it's like a classically challenging film. from that era. And, you know, obviously the idea of taking these actresses and putting them into this situation, you know, isolating them for 4 weeks in this one location, forcing them to be in this terrifying new home, and a home, of course, being affiliated with the domestic. I think it was really, I mean, what she gets out of it, even though she was being really being very cruel to these people, you know, both on screen as the therapist and then as the director, the writer, the conceiver of this project. I think she really achieved something that is amazing, and it's always, you know, there have been, I can't help but think of more recent films where it's like, okay, or, you know, I know I like Terrence Malick, but forgive me, like Song to Song, like where it's like, okay, I'm just going to have these actors do these different games. They're kind of just going to go at it. And it's just so fucking boring and not good.
Yeah.
Because they're not actually very good actors, some of them. Versus this, where it's like, okay, so this is the sort of intensity and honesty you can only get out of, you know, this intense rehearsal process, this intense immersion. And what it's saying, I think, you know, I don't necessarily agree with, I agree with her critique of psychiatry, but I'm not going to say that psychiatry itself should be done away with. It should probably be thought of in some way. But I found it, you know, like I said, there are parts of it that really, I don't know, I identified with, or I was like, oh, I didn't realize that I also did that to myself. That sort of a thing. And in that way, I mean, not that you always have to see yourself on some of it, that you could have an epiphany. It's, I don't know. It's a good film, and I think you should, you know, power through it. Just really give yourself over to it. Don't look at your phone. Don't live tweet it. Just go for it.
I found myself unable to really look at my phone besides when I was just like taking notes and stuff, because I was constantly wondering what she was going to throw at me next.
Right.
Just the imagery is just so just wild that I was like, anything could happen next on screen. So I was
unpredictable.
Yeah, I was attached. I was like, what are you going to do to me here? So.
Well, and I'd also say it reminded me of Let's Scare Jessica to Death. Because of the drowning,
for sure.
Which is so funny because we did not plan that, but we just talked about that 2 weeks ago.
Yeah. I know. I was like, I kept thinking about it and how, you know, how this is this anti-narrative, this very bold anti-narrative, exploring the same ideas in some ways as Let's Scare Jessica to Death. In a comparable location, you know, this remote, dilapidated farmhouse. You know, it's interesting to think of those two films like in conversation with each other. It also shows that many, you know, or even like Who's Crazy? That it's I think it's an Italian film where this idea was in the air and being talked about in a way that, you know, maybe problematic but interesting. And, you know, potentially useful, not just aesthetically, but, you know, emotionally, mentally.
Yeah. Yeah, like that one scene in Let's Scare Jessica to Death where she's kind of going through a mental breakdown in her room by herself, kind of hearing herself like, you'll never get through this, that kind of thing. That could have been almost like ripped from that movie and put into this in a way. So, yeah, that's a good comparison for sure.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I think that's going to wrap it up for the other side of the underneath. We are going to be right back, and we are going to be talking about Anguish.
Good job, John.
Add to his collection.
All the eyes of the city will be ours.
And even get into the movies.
One, please.
You have no idea what it's like to really suffer. Don't stop!
No one is going to leave here.
Do it. Don't stop.
Anguish.
See what happens when you disobey Mother?
Anguish.
All right, we are back, and we are talking about Anguish, the 1987 Spanish horror film directed by Bigas Luna. I hope I said that right. This is the Josh Pronounces People's Names Wrong podcast, as we've been over many times before.
That's right.
This film stars a Zelda Rubinstein, Michael Lerner, Talia Paul, and it is a very hard film to describe in a log line. So we might have to unfold this one a little bit as we go through it, because I had heard a lot about this film, and I was completely surprised by the actual film.
Yeah, me too.
That it actually was, because it is most commonly sort of spoken about, because people, I think, want to not spoil it for other people. It is mostly spoken about as the sort of giallo film that it sort of is for about 30 minutes.
Right.
And we go full spoilers on the show, everyone knows, because we make a
That's
point
the only way to talk about a fucking movie.
Exactly.
Sorry.
That's just the way that it goes. We're right there with you. We've always just straight up spoiled every film we've ever talked about on the main show.
Oh, yeah.
Without saying it. I figured I'd say it just for this one, because I did so much appreciate the experience that I would recommend, if anyone who cares about that kind of stuff wanted to watch the film first and then come back and listen, I would say go ahead and do that, because I did really appreciate the experience I had with it.
But that's the only
But
warning
yeah,
now.
we're going to be... There's literally no way to talk about this film without just... I think jumping right into the fact that this is an extremely metafictional horror film.
Oh yeah.
It is very broadly a giallo film in the vein of stuff that we've talked about before. I mean, we've covered a lot of Argento, we've covered Bava, we've covered Fulci on this show. It has a sort of similar vibe to it as you're watching Michael Lerner playing this character named John Pressman, who is the diabetic son of this woman named Alice, and he is also ophthalmologist's assistant.
Yeah.
He's an orderly at like an eye clinic.
Yeah.
Yes,
that's a way to say it without having to say ophthalmologist.
Yeah, goddamn. Yes. He works with people's eyes and eyesight, but he is also, as Violet noted, he really is just, a pretty lowly assistant, who is also himself, apparently, he is actually growing blind.
And his mother props him up as like the best surgeon in town or something like that. Which comes into play with their relationship for sure.
But is she
that's
wrong?
one of the best moments when she's screaming on the phone. He's like, he's the best surgeon in your hospital. And
is she wrong? Look how he
good.
does a very good job taking out those eyeballs.
Very clean.
He's
clean.
good, but I mean, I feel like if I was trying to hopefully have better eyesight, that I would not be going to this man.
Yeah. He doesn't replace them, just takes them out.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. In that sense, it actually kind of reminded me a little bit of Peeping Tom, which we talked about on the show.
Oh,
he. Yeah.
No, this movie. I mean, I think what really makes me love this movie is that there's so many. It's a meta. It's a film that's playing with its meta textualness, but it's also commenting on metatextual horror films like that, like very clearly, and kind of making fun of them in certain respects. Like it's going out of its way to have, like the literally slicing up an eyeball, having a little homage to Shen Andalou, having a the pigeons and the snails, like just having the most disgusting fucking pets possible. Casting Zelda Rubinstein after Poltergeist and being like, you know the slave from Poltergeist. Come on, this is gonna. She's weird. All of these things, and I mean. Yeah, I'm sorry.
She's
continue,
so creepy too. That raspy, high pitched voice that she has, as she's like, "You don't know what it is to suffer."
Yeah, her delivery is amazing. What about?
I mean, she has such ridiculous. Like, I mean, when she does and again, the fact that it's so Freudian or Lacanian rather, that she, you know, that the way that she, you know, she lives alone with her son and they live in this really dank, dark apartment. And she sort of like psychically bonds with him, and she says, you know, she's telling him to like focus. It's sort of like a hypnosis thing, but mostly it's just like this very weird, like the child is returning to the mother's body, and she's like, your head is filling up with blood, and it's like the way she talks about it is like very clearly a sexual thing, like the way, you know, it's sort of like his head becomes a penis in this way, and it's like this. It's ridiculous, but it's also
her when she's hypnotizing him and she's like, "We are once again together as one, mommy and son."
I love the imagery too, because it's just that classic hypnosis thing where she puts on a record with a spiral, like black and white spiral, and I don't know, it reminded me of like something that they do, you know, back in like the 50s or 60s when someone's like spinning out of control or something like that. I really appreciated that.
Well, no, that's what he has on the Peeping Tom thing, right? Doesn't he have that spiral that goes as attached to the camera too? Like, well, even the fact that it's called the movie is called The Mommy. It's just
right.
Like,
the film within a film.
Yeah, the film within the film is called The Mommy, which is such a fucking lazy title, but it's also like you're watching The Mommy and you're like, oh shit, this is good. This is
I would watch this.
I love when he like kills the yuppies in their all white house. Like I'm just like, oh my god, yes, this rules.
Well, that's the thing is like at first, because I didn't know that it did the whole the meta twist or whatever within like the first 20 minutes, half an hour. So I was on board with all the weirdness and crazy shit I was seeing. I'm like, all right, let's see where this mom and son relationship goes. Here we go, and then it does this whole other thing. But speaking of Michael Lerner, has he done other like horror stuff? Because I know him from like Barton Fink and like Elf and things like that. So
I remember him very vividly from an episode of Tales from the Crypt, where he plays an ice cream. He makes his living as an ice cream truck salesman, and he's actually like an evil twin. Like and then he like these guys are like trying to steal his ice cream truck and take all the money, and they kill his twin, but then he comes back and he kills them. So that's just I have very fond memories of staying up after Saturday Night Live was over and watching heavily edited Tales from the Crypt episodes on my local NBC affiliate. So that one was always burned into my mind. It was really good. And I actually rewatched all of Tales from the Crypt. I guess
I got to do that.
God, 2 years ago now. That's time. But, you know, it was those are still really great. And you can see some of your favorite celebrities and minor character actors.
Yeah.
Really go for it.
Yeah, do some crazy stuff.
But he's been in a lot of
Michael
stuff.
Lerner, I have also just looked up. Apparently, he was in William Lustig's Maniac Cop 2, which I still haven't seen.
Oh, okay.
But I mean, if you're in a Bill Lustig movie, I mean, God help you.
Well, and I mean, this film is clearly like reacting to like a Bill Lustig thing, right?
Oh yeah,
like it's
definitely.
Like I said, it's so good.
Yeah, there's a lot of, you know, like the basic, you know, fundamentals of you know, sort of like what kind of trashy European exploitation horror kind of looked like, especially. But also, you know, you think that's the film that you're just watching for about 20 or 30 minutes, and I mean, credit to Luna. Like, you're just into it. It's effective. I felt like I was watching like when he breaks into that house and he's cutting people's eyes out and stuff. I thought I was watching like a De Palma movie briefly.
Oh my god! I know. It's so good.
I was having a great time.
He puts the record on when she starts, like, and the opera crescendos right as she starts screaming. Like that's such a De Palma thing, and I was just like, yes.
For sure.
Yeah, I thought I was watching like one of the suspense sequences out of like Dress to Kill or something like
Exactly.
that. Or that's absolutely what it feels like watching Michael Lerner, who's getting revenge on this woman who was very upset about how brutally he put the contacts into her during their session, and after his mother hypnotizes him, he goes on a killing spree where he is going to take all of their eyes. And he just starts cutting people's eyes out with scalpels.
Well,
it's
not
really,
just
really
anywhere.
Horrible.
He kills this evil yuppie couple, and then he goes to the movies.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And
Well,
Zelda
what's interesting
Rubinstein,
though,
at one point she says, we're going to take all the eyeballs in the world, and it's like, oh my god.
yeah.
And it's like, and again, it's like this ridiculous thing, but it also totally, like, clearly a meta commentary on the act of watching a film, but then also like that fits in that narrative. She probably doesn't want her son to fucking take as many eyeballs as possible.
But what's super interesting is how early he lets you in on what I think otherwise would be described as sort of like the gimmick of the movie, but I think is so well constructed that it's really not that.
Yeah.
But it's during that first kill when he first pulls that yuppie woman's eye out that you can tell immediately sort of like the texture of the screen changes. It kind of gets that more sort of like that the film imperfection quality to it, like all of a sudden you're watching a film print. And then during that murder sequence, it is revealed that you are watching a movie within a movie, that the Michael Lerner and Zelda Rubinstein film, The Mommy, is actually being watched by the main characters of what is going to be the film that we're actually watching, Anguish. And I love that it happens during that first like squirm-inducing moment of him like pulling an eyeball out, and it just cuts to a girl being like, "Oh, I don't. This is just making me dizzy. You think this is fun? Like this is just creepy." And I'm like, I think this is kind of fun.
Yeah, I like that. That one girl definitely would have been a fan of the show for sure. The other one, not so much. Not so much.
Yeah, the one girl is like berating her friend for being freaked out by the movie, being like,
Well,
you don't
next
like
time
this?
I'll take you to a Disney movie.
Right.
I know,
That's
that
a great
fucking
line.
rule, she was so merciless.
Oh yeah,
The
unreal.
But that, and what I love is that you see her getting like sick and like, having reaction to the film as if it were real, right? Where she's sweating, she's feeling ill. And then you see other people in the movie start to feel that way too. And did you watch the copy of this film where it has like the narration at the beginning?
I didn't. I actually looked for multiple copies to find the one with the narration at the beginning because I heard about it though.
Yeah, because the narration is, the narration is basically like, you may experience certain physical symptoms during this film, but you should not talk, exerting like that bodily control over the spectator and be like, you shouldn't talk. If you get nauseous, you might be hypnotized slightly by this film. And then, and then later on, here, keep talking. And then it relates to something that happens in the movie theater of the people who are watching The Mommy.
Yeah, that's what's so funny. I really wished I had seen this version because apparently it says, during this film you are about to see, you will be subjected to subliminal messages and mild hypnosis. This will cause you no physical harm or lasting effect, but if for any reason you lose control or feel that your mind is leaving your body, leave the auditorium immediately.
Do not go on a killing spree.
Wait,
so people are just watching.
Wait, what?
But people are watching, and we're getting all these shots of their faces and their eyes watching the screen of Michael Lerner in like a trashy giallo movie, literally ripping people's eyeballs out. It's and you're watching these people who, again, despite the fact, as Violet has pointed out, like all of the kind of cliches that the film is operating it in are kind of exaggerated, cartoonishly in a lot of ways. The people are still physically recoiling. They're still buying into it as if it's real, which is kind of just overall it's it's what we do with movies. You're recognizing the artificiality of it, but still being viscerally impacted by it. What you're seeing on the screen. But then you get Zelda being like, all the eyes of the city will be ours. and here's this girl being like, this feels too real. I'm fucked up right now.
Well, and I love that for those first couple of audience shots, because it's like she is freaking out, and then maybe one or two other people are freaking out, but then literally everyone else is just like chewing their popcorn like cud, just totally blank faced. Or there's this one guy who's there with his girlfriend who's just like takes a bite of popcorn, slowly chews it, and then they smooch. They start to make out. Like, and they're just so dispassionate. It's just like everybody is just like on their little track going around fulfilling their duty. Even though they say, "Oh, I love this movie," there's no reaction.
One shot
so,
I really like.
Good.
With actually, it's a funny use of popcorn. It's within the Mommy movie, and it's when Michael Lerner is going around and killing everybody in the theater, and he kills one dude while the girlfriend is away getting popcorn, and then she comes back and asks him to like, hey, do you want some popcorn? And so that she doesn't find out that he's dead, he like reaches over and grabs the popcorn himself, and I appreciated that. There was actually some like dark twisted comedy to the film a lot of the time too.
Well, also I love that this audience of people in the theater in the Mommy are just watching this old dinosaur movie, like this black and white piece of shit.
Yeah,
they're just watching The Lost World. Yeah,
the Lost World, and they're just sort of again totally dispassionately chewing their popcorn, being good spectators. Supposedly, no one's talking, and just they're enraptured by it, and that allows the Michael Lerner character to go around and just cut everybody up.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, well, and that's when it gets really crazy with the filmmaking, because Michael Lerner's character in The Mommy, he goes to the movie theater to watch The Lost World, and he starts killing people in the movie theater, but it's cutting between him killing people in the movie theater in the film, and then the people watching that in a theater on screen, and you can see them actually begin to kind of like shift as they're watching like a dude like do a slasher movie inside a theater, and they're starting to kind of get like a little weirded out by that. Do you know what this reminded me of? And it's completely stolen, actually, now that because I just hadn't seen this movie before. But the opening to Wes Craven's Scream 2 is just straight up this.
100%.
Well, Wes Craven was like on postmodernism way before.
Yeah.
He's like...
Absolutely.
I mean, he's like the master. I've seen like all the good Freddy movies, and like that one, I still think about that one where it's like the actors from Nightmare on Elm Street start to become like their characters. I still think about that one. That one's fucking genius.
Yeah, that's the new Nightmare. That one's awesome.
Oh yeah, that's great.
Or Dream Warriors.
Exactly, but like that whole opening where they're watching the events of the original Scream on screen in a movie theater, and then it's Jada Pinkett Smith gets up and goes to the washroom, and the boyfriend gets up and goes to the washroom, and he gets killed in the bathroom stall, which they also do in this. They have, the one girl leaves because she's so upset about the film that she goes to the bathroom stall, where she finds out there's actually a real killer actually operating within the movie theater that they're watching, possibly inspired by the movie that they're watching, The Mommy.
Well,
because he's seen it so many times.
But she goes, because the girl who's like the canary in the coal mine, she gets really sick, and she goes into the bathroom, and she sees somebody wearing blue jeans and these kind of like square sneakers, and she's like, "Oh my God, there's a man in there, and he's going to kill all of us." And so then her friend, who is just like, she loves gore. She's total like, badass. "Okay, fine, I'll go in." Then she goes in. She passes a woman who's kind of, she has short hair, blue jeans on, the sneakers on. She passes her. She goes into the bathroom, and she's like, "My friend, my friend is overreacting." And then the man who is going to kill everybody in the theater where people are watching The Mommy comes in, and he has very similar shoes on. And he has and then that's when the bloodbath starts. So it's like there's this false start to the massacre that I just think is so fucking good. And also, absolutely. I mean, I'm sure we could, I feel like I'm rushing you guys talking about this film because I love it. I just enjoy it so much. But
You want to get to the meaty parts for sure. I know
the guy who he's committing the killing spree in the theater where people are watching The Mommy. He just looks so much like Lon Chaney. He has like this Frankenstein kind of look where he has this very long face, these giant bags under his eyes. His shoes are kind of like square in a way, or excuse me, not Lon Chaney, the Boris Karloff Frankenstein, where he has the long face, the huge bags under his eyes, like these sneakers that are really square. And he's just, I don't know. I kept, every time I saw him, or when we first sort of start seeing him in the theater, I was just really struck. He's the classic movie monster, right?
Yeah.
It was just like,
I also like the way they film his violence, because like we get some violence in the beginning with the eye cutting and stuff like that, and it's it's filmed more like a giallo. It's got a little more artistic flair to it. Whereas the first kill that we get with the guy that's within our movie, Anguish, it's a cashier at the popcorn stand or whatever, and she just goes like, "Wow, you've seen this movie quite a few times," and out of nowhere, a shotgun blast just blasts her away, and it's so to the point and just like it's very jarring that I found it like it's much more cold the way that they express the killing and the murders in the Anguish film that we're watching compared to The Mommy, which is more like over the top and. I kind of want to say fun, to be honest, but it is what it is.
Well, no, I mean, it's like the difference. It's not just sort of an expression of like real violence versus screen violence. It's also like, here's American violence.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. I think that's hugely
idealized
important.
Version of American violence, where instead of a gun, he has a scalpel.
Right,
which is obviously a way more European way to approach a killing spree. And I thought that was also on my mind throughout this.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah,
definitely.
because do you know what it actually recalled for me was Targets. 1968 film
100%.
About the dude who goes on the lone gunman killing spree, and it's used in that film as a similar sort of metatextual quality as the backdrop for this dying form of an older Hollywood and the new Hollywood kind of coming in, the birth of this more gruesome Hollywood that reflects the American psychology and culture that exists now. And so despite the fact that the film that they're watching is all sort of like European eyeballs and blades and your Argentos and your Fulcis, it's really geniusly cross-cut between the exploitation film that the characters are watching and the one that we're watching, which is more of, again, like a mass killing spree.
Yeah. I love that contrast between, it
almost becomes a crime or cop movie by the end.
Yeah. We were talking about that popcorn gag that he does within the Mommy movie, but then you cut to like the killer in Anguish, where he's just dragging bodies in the bathroom and piling them into a bathroom stall. Like, it's just so much colder and gross in that sense.
Definitely. And yeah, I mean, if we get into like the really big meat, which is the main sustained set piece of the film, is the killer in Anguish killing a bunch of the theater patrons who are watching The Mommy, which in the film has Michael Lerner going on a killing spree in the theater at the same time. So we're cross-cutting between the two, and there are many moments very intentionally where you almost can't distinguish between the two.
Right.
Because at a certain point, they're watching Michael Lerner in The Mommy go out into the lobby, start to seal the doors. Yeah. And what's so amazing is that it kind of gets into the anxiety of the theater patrons, because they're basically watching an instructional video on how to massacre a movie theater's worth of people while they're sitting in a movie theater. So you can start to watch their eyes, shift around. They start to squirm around in their seats a little bit. They start checking their surroundings for a killer a little bit, being like, well, you know what? It's just a movie though. I'm kind of getting these, these anxious feelings, but it's just a movie. And they say that all the time. They're like, this stuff's not real. It's all make believe. Like, you know, the girl is constantly reassuring her that it's just a movie. But everything in their body language is, you know, it is getting under their skin in certain ways as, you know, the actual killer starts going through and killing people in the theater. And watching both of them, you do kind of get that contradiction, which is, again, you're watching something that's so... again, heightened and stylized to the point of cartoon in The Mommy, and then you're watching the more realistic version of that taking place in this, but still drawn in these really, you know, formally well done suspense sequences that, you know, they do kind of recall what I like so much about the sort of reflexive, the self-reflexive suspense sequencing of someone like Brian De Palma, where he uses your knowledge of the cliches and the form and the trickery and the artificiality of it to the point where he brings your attention to it, but at the same time still mines it for really, you know, real horror and real emotional torment. Like I think of things like Blowout or Body Double or Femme Fatale, and it's how you buy into these things that you know are fake, but they feel real, even if you know that sensation of having to remind yourself it's just a movie. It can't hurt you. It's just a movie, which is funny too, because we just talked about that in The Fury, which is actually a line that one of the characters gets to the kids because they're brainwashing the kids using film.
That's right.
And they're saying you have to watch, but it's just a movie. Don't worry. Because there's that feeling that you have a sense of artistic distance or the literal distance from your seat to the screen.
Well,
but
I would also say...
But the distance that it has from your eyes and your mind is very close.
No, I think you're totally right on about that. But then also you have to remember that this came out in the 80s when that first wave of panic about, you know, video nasties,
I was going to bring
violence.
this up.
Yes.
Yeah, that sort of, that idea came into the public consciousness and it was very aggressive. And it was like, you can't, these things should not be allowed to exist because they create this horrific violence. And of course, you know, then it would sort of crescendo in the 90s with like, you know, Marilyn Manson and Doom and, you know, violent video games and, you know, what I
like about
shootings, but
what I like about the way they use it in this film though is I don't necessarily know if the director was going for like a film can affect you in this way, but the way that the character is and the way that the plot goes, it does feel like it's kind of giving you that scare for media, and I like it, to be honest. I mean, I don't agree overall, of course, that, you know, film is making people kill people and all that kind of stuff, but I love the way it's presented in this movie, and so I was just totally on board. I'm like, yes, the movies are bad. They're just gonna kill people for sure, you know. Like,
well, yeah, it's like fulfilling that fear.
Yeah,
for somebody
exactly.
who, like, that societal. I thought that was so great.
Yeah, I loved it.
Yeah,
he's like worshiping the poster at a certain point. He's like, "Yes, mommy, I will kill them. I'll do it for you."
I was about to say, like, his relationship to the movie is that he doesn't identify with the Michael Lerner character. He wants to work with the mommy. You know, like he doesn't see himself as this
because he has presumably been hypnotized by the mommy's hypnosis in the same way.
Yeah,
yes, exactly.
Great. It's fucking awesome.
Yeah, I know. It's so good.
Definitely.
The only difference between the theater of The Mommy and the theater in Anguish is that Anguish, the theater that's in Anguish is during the day, and the Anguish in the film inside of The Mommy is at night. And so when you're cutting between these two, and I just, you know, as just like an experiential thing, thinking that, okay, this was made in 1987, people are going to be sitting in a movie theater and watching this on a screen, giving it another layer of reflexivity.
Oh my God, I wish I could have seen this in a movie theater. That was what I was sitting there feeling the entire time, especially with that opening where it says, you know, you in the audience, you might be, you might experience some mild hypnosis as well.
You might want to collect eyeballs after this too.
Exactly. but I like that. I like that. That's really the only. That's like the small difference, because, you know, the one thing that I love is, you know, going to the movies is that, you know, maybe you go in and it's light out and then you come out and it's dark. like that weird time travel that happens when you go into a movie, and then also how that relates to how both movies play with quote unquote movie time, where certain things are like they should not take that long, but they're sort of expanded and expanded and expanded for the sake of the movie's impact, for its narrative, and how other things are just really condensed, and how the movie time really goes out of control in both The Mommy and in Anguish when it's massacre time, right? Or it's the setup, or it's the setup to massacre time.
I think
so you really have to sit with it.
I think we also have this notion that having within in the film The Mommy, where it's all happening at night, you have this kind of thing. It happens in horror movies all the time, where all of the murders and just the bad shit happens at nighttime, where it's in the veil of darkness or whatever. But having that jarring contrast when she walks outside and you know that the guy just shotgunned a bunch of people, and it's just 2 o'clock in the afternoon on a beautiful Tuesday or something like that. There is something kind of just it feels more sickly, there's just something grosser about it for some reason. I think it's just a small thing that we have about what we view the daytime and nighttime, but I did find that very interesting.
Yeah, and I think it lends a semblance of sort of like something realistic to her going out and it just not being this overly stylized European night sort
very
of quality to
town.
it.
Yeah, exactly.
The fact that it takes on that real mass murder quality to the anguish part of the film that we are watching definitely makes it stranger almost. It makes it genuinely creepy, even though again you are aware, because the film is constantly bringing you awareness to its film within a film idea. It's constantly telling you that you're watching a film all the time.
Well, and I also...
So it's doing both of those. It's doing exactly what the characters are experiencing to you, the audience member.
Right. And when she goes outside and she goes over to that businessman, or whatever the fuck he is, the guy with that crazy flannel coat in the middle of California or something, and that he doesn't believe her at first. And, obviously that harkens back to the ineffectualness or the scariness of police in something like Hitchcock. But it also is he thinks he doesn't believe this young girl because she's just seen too many horror movies. And this couldn't possibly be real. But it is, that she has to basically beg him to believe her is so, it makes it, it's another thing I would say that makes it realer. More real. Yeah,
definitely.
Yeah. Well, and especially too, because at the point that she's doing that, the film within a film and the film that we're watching are both sort of climaxing simultaneously in ways that get some really amazing images out of it, where
incredibly
the patrons in the theater realize that someone has been killed inside the theater. They start running around and freaking out, and meanwhile the characters in the Lost World
are
that
also
they're watching in The Mommy are running around and freaking out, and then our characters in the theater watching those characters in the theater run around start running around,
and then you get that projected onto the killer itself, and he starts talking to the mommy and shit that on the screen. It's just absolutely batshit by the end.
Well, because he takes the young girl who's been scared of the movie since the beginning. He takes her hostage at the front of the screen, and you get a scope film screen of the killer in the film, Michael Lerner, taking a woman hostage in front of a screen of The Lost World,
and they're both pointing their weapons at the audience. It's fucking awesome.
Yeah. And what's he saying? He says, "I see the light, I feel its power," and he's looking up at the projector.
He's like, "I'll be a good boy." He says, "Oh man, just wants to make his mom happy,"
Yeah, and meanwhile, the cops have started to show up, and they have just the image too of sniper shooters ready inside the projector booth.
Yeah,
oh my god,
Wild.
What an image just in general.
Well, another thing that, when the killer in Anguish stands up in front of the audience, he starts yelling at them like, stay calm, stay in your seats. And he shoots anybody who tries to leave the theater, right? So it's like,
oh my god, and yeah, them running and him shooting too, just like mass shooting style.
no,
Horrible.
it's terrifying, but it's also like he wants this audience to be like the perfect audience, right? Where there's just no talking, nobody's leaving, everybody's just paying attention to what's happening on the screen. Like it's just, it's so I don't know.
I think at one point, I think it might even be the sniper who's looking at the killer. He says, I think we should stop the movie. It looks like he's talking to the screen. So it's like, it's further telling him, it's like, I think this might be the issue. This film is hypnotizing this guy.
And then they only choose to like take off the audio.
Yeah.
And that the images just keep going.
And he's still looking at it, getting inspired. Yeah.
Yes.
Oh my God.
Yeah, because he just wants to serve the mommy. Meanwhile,
That's right.
the mommy in the film is like pulling up to the theater because she says something along the lines like, I warned you that you had to leave the theater, you fool, and now I'm coming to take you home. So he wants the mommy to arrive at the theater and take him home because that's what happens in the movie.
Right.
In reality, the cops have shown up and are going to fucking shoot him.
Right. It's about the same number of cops that show up during that one point of heat. It's like this is normal small town America, but they have like this giant fleet of cop cars and a SWAT team. Which again, it's speaking to like, this is American violence, right?
Yeah,
is that
100%.
Absolutely.
This seemingly normal city can't operate without all these police.
Right.
Yeah. Well, and eventually too, the cops do take the shot and they do kill the shooter because he's once again being so swept up by the screen.
Right.
He actually loses track of his own hostage, and then the young girl, who's obviously freaked out because she was the one who sensed that something was wrong since Michael Lerner started carving out eyes in the first 20 minutes. And she's the one who was taken hostage in a real mass shooting scenario. Like all of her sort of unarticulated fears have come true in a way. She gets this moment where Michael Lerner, he breaks the fourth wall and looks through at the audience in the theater, and he says, I want your eyes too, and he stabs at the screen and the scalpel comes through the screen and it hits the girl in the eyeball.
Oh yeah.
But again, this is like after they've shut off the sound, so it's just the sound of people screaming, and he turns to her and he's like, I want your eyeball, and then she really believes that this thing is stuck in her eye, and she's getting his his rightly hysterical.
I love that quick shot of like it's in her eye and the blood's going down and she's kind of just like flailing, and then it goes to the medics surrounding her, and then when the medics reveal her again, she has nothing in her eye and she's just going crazy. It's just a really cool way of expressing that.
It's about a real girl experiencing what is usually reserved for the psychological terror of the final girl.
Yeah,
who makes it through the movie.
Exactly.
Where you're just completely broken and scarred and irreversibly different than you were when you sat down at the beginning of the movie. Except she was just a girl who walked in to watch one of the movies, and now she's left the movie theater, being the character.
And what I love too is that you could have probably ended on like her being stabbed and then her wailing around and then revealing that it was in her head, because it puts forth the idea of like the trauma and her the realization that she was kind of correct in some way.
Oh yeah, it literally came through the screen and into her real body.
Right. and then I love that they just have to add like one cherry on top with the ending hospital scene.
Oh no, there are two cherries. There are two cherries.
Yeah.
Because there's
that's true.
With the ending,
you know which one you're missing.
There's the one with she's in the hospital and the Michael Lerner character comes and he's checking out her eyeballs after he kills her friend. But then there's the lights go up in the movie and you're watching
right,
an audience
right.
watching the credits. And there's
Right,
that one
yeah.
guy who waits until the very end to leave.
Yes,
it's
I
like-
stayed there with him the whole time. He's a G.
Well, he's a G,
Absolutely.
or maybe he's the next mass murderer, right?
Yeah.
Where he loves
Well,
this
I feel
movie
bad,
so
'cause that-
much.
Yeah, so you're revealed that the movie that we were watching was also another movie within a movie.
Right.
So then we get to watch the movie of the audience just watching the credits for the movie that
Right.
we just watched.
Yeah.
Just to take it to that next crazy level, but also it just reminded me because I did a lot of programming and management at a local art house here. And, I always, when we ran film with the projectionist and it was like a late night, midnight screening, I always sat there at the end waiting
Well,
for the
that's-
people to get up.
yeah,
So
that was-
it was my exact experience of my job. It
Right.
was the exact frame that they end this movie on. Like
Yeah.
it is the people who at the back of the theater waiting for all the people to get up as the lights slowly come up. And, there was always one guy. He made it through the whole credits. He was the guy who wanted to, get his money's worth.
Well, it
Heck
also
yeah.
makes you, if you stay to watch that, again, assuming it's 1987, you're seeing this in a film, you become that guy too. The movie ends
Yep.
with you.
Yeah.
The layers of this. It's
If
so
I ever saw
was
this in a
also-
theater, I would definitely be the last guy watching the last guy watch the credits.
Yes,
Absolutely.
exactly.
I gotta say too, just being in this COVID craziness, it was very nice to I just sat there and like acted like I was in a theater for 5 minutes. It was fantastic.
Oh, I know. It
It was a little bit of escapism there.
Yeah.
We miss him.
I miss
No,
the
the-
theater, is what I'm saying.
No, and it's true. It's like this unintentional. Obviously, movies change. How they hit, it
Yeah.
changes, and that I also appreciate that. I was like, oh yeah, sitting in the credits. I love that. I miss that.
Yeah, I do.
Yeah, well, I mean, pivoting towards the reductive rating round here, I think on Anguish, this one also got the high 4 for me because I was really taken with once again how it is both functionally and very credit to Luna, like in terms of the filmmaking, it's a very solid giallo until it's a very solid mass shooting of a bunch of people watching a giallo film, merging, sort of like again a little bit of what I felt about Targets, which in my opinion is one of the best films about sort of like the rise of sort of like American violence in that specific kind of period. So I was thinking about that. I was thinking about Brian De Palma, which are good things to be thinking about watching any movie.
Oh, yeah.
But the fact that he merges those two together in a way that once again, weaponizes your knowledge of, of genre film, of cliche, of the form and the trickery and the artificiality of it all. And, once again, makes you genuinely, sort of horrified by it and viscerally impacted by it, which is the exact experience that the audience in the film is wrestling with, in the way that, he gets into movies as, voyeurism and fetish and artificial and, but at the same time, this thing that has very real impacts on you. Whether that real impact is it inspires someone to go and kill someone, is I'll leave that to other people. I don't believe that, but there is a real transaction taking place when you sit down to watch a film.
Yeah.
There is a physical act of it when you go to a theater, when a projectionist puts that film on the screen for you, and there is once again a real physical distance, but a psychological intimacy to the experience of it. And I think that Luna, through all of his filmmaking techniques and all of his metatextual mind fuckery that he's trying to pull off here, I think that he does get at that with his filmmaking.
Yeah.
My question for him would be how he feels about now that America does have documented accounts of actual shootings inside theaters and like concert venues and stuff. Like at the time, he was probably imagining, again, a sort of exaggeration of American violence.
Right.
And now it's just come true.
Yeah. For real.
So watching this now in a theater, I think it would only have more impact than it originally did, and
I'm sure.
I really hope I get that chance one day.
Yeah, I would also give it a 4 out of 5. The meta twist really worked for me. I very happy that I didn't know about it, because it really just it threw me into the film, and I was very engaged the entire time. And I love the contrast again from, you know, the night and day from the Mommy movie to Anguish, and the cold hard like bluntness of the killing from Anguish compared to kind of the more, you know, stylistic, expressionistic giallo killings that happen in Mommy. And then for him to actually say, I don't know how on purpose again, but for him to say, you know, that media and film and, you know, eventually video games and stuff would have an impact on us to inspire like actual physical violence. I think obviously I disagree, but the way that he expresses that in this movie is fantastic.
Well, I think he's making fun of it. I think he's making fun of that idea by having this be so over the top. But
I just find it interesting that eventually, I mean, obviously, the people that did the things that they did weren't, and I don't think, inspired by films. They never said that in whatever manifesto they had or anything like that. But I just find it interesting that 10 to 20 years later, we did start to see shootings in, you know, movie theaters and things of that nature. So it's just very fascinating to watch this movie now, knowing all of the bad things that have happened in the past 20 years.
Well, yeah, and in part, it's because the film is also about, you know, how you channel real violence into our art, or try to make sense of it a little bit in a way.
Well, I would almost say that, you know, I think what makes me feel like Luna is making fun of the idea of, you know, people being inspired by movies to go out and kill actual violence is that, again, he does not identify with the Michael Lerner character. He wants he's fixated on the mother, and it's this thing that's separate from the movie. Even though he does certain things that are, you know, mimic the movie, he's experiencing it in a way that is different. And I mean, I think, you know, when we think about violence and mass shootings and things like that, what often becomes apparent to me is that this person thought they were the one, and that is in every action movie. It doesn't matter how violent or unviolent it is. The idea that you are the chosen one and you must do this thing, and that narrative gets repeated over and over and over. And it's like, well, does the violence matter, or does this sort of like weird, you know, you're the anointed Christ figure who has to go out and do this thing? Is that the actual problem? And then the violence just sort of secondary? Because I mean, I don't believe that.
We're gonna solve the gun crisis in America right here on the show right now.
That's right.
Quit making fucking weird established movie IP, like established IP movies where you goddamn do that stuff. But quit it. Just stop it. They're not good movies anyway. But I was actually, you know, talking about, I meant to mention this earlier, but I was also reminded, you know, how straightforward the violence is by Alan Clark's Elephant. And that actually came out after this movie, but it's just this movie of, you know, somebody walking up to someone in a store and shooting them and then walking away. And just these very matter-of-fact depictions of violence. And it was actually based on something that had happened during the Troubles. But I think it's what I really enjoy about this movie is that it's taking apart violence, depictions of violence, but then also it's very intelligent. I
think it's taking them apart and then also playfully indulging them simultaneously in the ways that movies do. And I mean, as people who talk a lot about a lot of violent movies, I mean, I think Jamie and I have experienced a lot of what, you know, he's playing with on the screen here. I saw a lot of, you know, how I watch movies in this movie. That is not to say that I'm going to become the Joker or anything. But, you know.
Give it time.
Well, and I mean, the thing that also kind of connects Anguish to the other side of the underneath for me is that it's a provocation. It's provoking the audience. And
absolutely.
And
it's assaultive.
And in the other side of Underneath, it's not using female nudity to provoke. It's not using violence against women to provoke, which was very much, like Panic theater stuff or the theater of cruelty, that sort of idea of like you have to show violence to provoke people, because Arden doesn't do, the violence that she's showing, again, is couched within like, this is a treatment for mental illness. It's not somebody coming around with a knife. And in this movie, it's showing, it's provoking not through the violence, but the premise. It's this purely narrative thing, but then you can also, as we keep saying, like you can get pulled into it and really feel that terror. And it's an invitation to feel that terror, especially if you're sitting in a movie theater watching this. Like it's very intense. It's what I like about horror films is that they really engage your body in ways that other genres don't necessarily. I mean, I think comedy is another one where you're having a physical reaction, you're laughing, you're getting very, you're feeling certain things. But with horror, you might be laughing, you might be cringing, you might be feeling sick. And this film like puts you in your body, makes you hyper aware of your surroundings in a way that, but you're still stitched into the narrative. And like that and it's provoking you, on a almost like a physical level, or just in terms of like we're dumb little animals that see something out of the corner of our eye and we're like, oh, shadow people are real, like that sort of thing. But we really trust our senses, and we shouldn't.
It's only a movie, right?
Right. Chill out.
That's right.
But I have to give it a rating. I give it a 5 out of 5 scalpels in the eye.
Nice.
I hate doing star ratings, so I just I don't know. It's fun if I approach it like on cinema, where it's like 5 bags of popcorn.
Yeah.
That's right. That's right. All right. Well, I think that's going to wrap it up for everything this week. That was The Other Side of the Underneath and Anguish. Thanks so much, Violet, for joining us and for bringing these films with you this week.
Thank you. It was so fun talking to you guys. I really enjoyed this.
If you've got anything to plug, this is usually the part of the show where we have you do that.
Well,
what's going on in Violet's world?
Well, I'm working on a podcast project. I think that would be relevant or of interest to your listeners with Adam Naiman. So that should be dropping in a couple of weeks, hopefully. So stay tuned.
Very cool. I'm definitely going to be checking that out. Violet, I'm not sure. Are you on? You're on Twitter, right?
Yeah.
You want people following you on Twitter?
Yeah. Why the hell not?
Fair enough. I understand.
I'm at Unbutton My Eyes, or you can just type in my name. Either one works.
Perfect. For our listeners, we are going to actually be back in 1 week's time, where we are going to be doing your patron voted episode, because once again we've introduced a little democracy around the parts over at patreon.com, where once every 2 months we do an episode where you guys nominate the double features and you guys then vote on the double feature that you want to see the most. So next week we are going to be doing Walter Hill's The Driver, as well as Michael Mann's Thief.
Oh, yeah.
That was the one that you guys voted on.
Guys.
And by the time that you guys are listening to this, the new poll should be going up very soon, or might even already be up. So again, patreon.com/Sleazoids podcast if you want to vote on the next one. But we're going to have a lot of fun talking about The Driver and Thief next week. And the week after, just by total happenstance, not planned at all, Violet's co-host for her upcoming podcast project that she's dropping soon, Adam Naiman, is coming on the show finally. And he is bringing with him Shadow of a Doubt, the Hitchcock from 1943, as well as The Stepfather from 1987. I think we are getting into some weird family dynamic thrillers.
I've wanted to watch The Stepfather for a while, so that's awesome.
Yeah, so that's what you can expect for free listeners in 2 weeks' time. But yeah, that being said, I think that wraps it up for everything this week. Thanks so much, guys, for listening, and keep it sleazy.
Keep it sleazy.